Chapter 1: The City That Ate the Night. Close your eyes if you are ready, or leave them open. Let them settle against the dark of wherever you are lying now, the ceiling, the wall, the particular quality of shadow that fills the corners of a room at night. It does not matter. You are going somewhere else tonight, and you do not need your eyes for this. Tonight we are going to Kaifeng. Not a Kaifeng you have likely imagined, because very few people in the world today have a clear picture of what this city was. It is not the China of dragons on silk screens, not the China of mountains and bamboo, not the China of emperors in forbidden palaces. The Kaifeng we are going to is something stranger and more surprising than any of those images. It is a city at the height of what historians now recognize as one of the most extraordinary bursts of human civilization ever recorded. A city where things existed that would not reappear in Europe for another 5 or 6 centuries. A city that already knew things the rest of the world was still waiting to discover. The year is approximately 1050 AD. The Song Dynasty is in what scholars call its northern period, its capital here in Kaifeng, before the invasions that would change everything in 1127. Right now, in this moment, Kaifeng is the largest city on Earth. 1 million people live here, perhaps more by some estimates. That number should be allowed to sit for a moment. 1 million people. In a city of timber and tile and canal water. In the year 1050, London at this time has perhaps 10 or 15,000 people, Paris a little more. Baghdad, the great Abbasid capital, is perhaps the only city that rivals Kaifeng in scale, and even Baghdad is debated. By most measures, Kaifeng is the biggest place a human being can be on this planet, right now, tonight. But here is what makes tonight, in particular, worth our attention. 85 years before our arrival, in the 3rd year of the era, which is to say the year 965 AD, the first Song emperor issued a decree that upended centuries of urban practice. For as long as anyone could remember, Chinese cities had enforced a night curfew. Market activity ceased when the drums of the ward gates sounded in the evening. People were expected inside. The streets, after dark, belonged to the officials and the watch. This was not a Song invention. The Tang dynasty before the Song had enforced it rigorously, dividing their capital N into walled residential wards whose gates locked at nightfall. Go outside after the drums and you could be punished. Emperor's decree in 965 AD changed this. Night markets, he said, could remain open until the 3rd watch drum, the stroke that falls somewhere around the hour we would now call 11 o'clock at night. It sounds modest. It was not. What followed over the decades after that decree was the invention of the night. Not the night as a danger, not the night as a void to be survived, but the night as a place, a space of commerce, of entertainment, of pleasure, of social life. By the time of our arrival in 1050, the curfew in Kaifeng has been not merely relaxed, but essentially abolished for the city's residents. Night markets run until midnight. Some reopen as early as the 3rd or 4th hour before dawn, what the Chinese timekeeping system calls the 5th watch. There is light on the canals. There is food being cooked at midnight. There is music. There are theater performances. There are shadow puppet shows on linen screens and storytellers beating their drums and wine shop owners with their doors propped open and their lamps burning. Kaifeng ate the night, swallowed it whole, made of it something entirely new, and we are going into it. You are not a tourist, and you are not a historian. Tonight you are a resident, a member of a merchant household, comfortably established, with a house near one of the smaller canals that threads through the city like a vein threads through a hand. You have had a full day. You have done what the day required. Now the day is tipping into evening, and the city is changing its character, as it does every night, into something softer and stranger and more alive with lamplight than it was under the sun. Come. The evening is beginning. Before we travel any further, if you are finding this peaceful, if this is helping you settle and rest, it would mean a great deal to me if you subscribe to the channel and left a like. It takes only a moment, and it helps this channel continue making these videos. And please, write something in the comments. Tell me where you are in the world right now and what time it is where you are. I am always genuinely curious. Write it in the comments when you have a moment. Now, let us continue. Chapter 2: Your House on the Canal. The house you are coming home to tonight is timber-framed. This is important to understand. Kaifeng is not a city of stone, not a city of brick in the way that Roman cities were built, not a city whose primary material is fired clay like Babylon. Kaifeng is a city of wood, pine and elm and cedar, felled in the mountains to the south and west, and floated down the river systems to the canal, which delivered them to the capital's warehouses and timber yards. The houses of Kaifeng are built on raised stone plinths to keep the timber off the damp ground, and the frames are assembled with carefully fitted joints, no nails or very few, the members fitting together with a precision that allows the building to flex rather than crack in a heavy wind. Rooftops have a characteristic gentle curve to them, the eaves sweeping outward and then turning up at the corners in the style that will come to define Chinese architecture in the imagination of the world. Your house is not a palace, but it is not a poor house. A merchant household of the middling sort in Kaifeng in 1050 would have been comfortable by the standards of the world. There are very few places on earth right now where a merchant family lives as well as this. The house sits behind a low wall, set back slightly from the lane. The entrance gate is timber, lacquered in a dark red-brown, with a brass fitting that you push with your palm to unlatch. Inside the gate, a small passage, a screen wall just inside, placed so that any malevolent influence coming down the lane cannot travel in a straight line into the house. Evil, in the cosmology of Song domestic belief, moves in straight lines. The screen wall stops it. You turn slightly to one side to enter the courtyard, and the screen performs its small, patient work. The courtyard itself is the heart of the house. This is the organizing principle of Chinese domestic architecture at this time and for centuries before and after. The courtyard faces the sky and holds the family's life around it. The earth of the courtyard floor has been packed smooth by years of feet. There is a stone basin near the center, holding rainwater, its surface still tonight, reflecting what little sky is left in the deepening hour. Potted plants along the walls, chrysanthemums, because it is autumn, the season for them, the flowers that have been associated with scholarly resignation and quiet endurance for centuries in Chinese poetry. The rooms open off the courtyard on three sides. The main hall is directly opposite the gate, the formal room, the altar room, the room that faces south in the proper orientation for receiving good fortune. To the left, the sleeping quarters. To the right, the kitchen and secondary storage. Above, on the upper floor reached by a narrow wooden stair, the study and a smaller room used for guests. Inside the main hall at the far end against the north wall, there is the altar. It is a low table lacquered black with a flat surface, perhaps a handspan deep. On it, the ancestor tablets. These are small upright plaques of wood, each inscribed with a name, the names of those in your family who have died. Your grandfather is here. Your father's older brother who died young, a great aunt. The tablets stand in a row, oldest to the right and newest to the left, and they represent the ongoing presence of the dead in the household, a presence that is not merely symbolic but practical and attentive. The ancestors watch. They can be addressed. They need to be fed, honored, included in the life of the family. Neglecting them is not simply a failure of sentiment. It is a failure of household management with real spiritual consequences. On the altar before the tablets, a small ceramic censer. The incense in it was lit this morning and burned down during the day. Tonight it will be lit again before the household sleeps. To the left of the altar shelf, hanging on the wall, a small scroll painting. A landscape, mountains in pale ink wash, with a traveler on a path and pine trees leaning in wind. This painting is new. An acquaintance of your father's who is a painter made it recently, and your father bought it at the night market. It cost him several hundred copper coins, which is a real expense, the kind you notice, but the painting is good. The painter has captured something in those mountains that is difficult to name. The traveler on the path looks like he knows where he is going, even though the mountains go on forever above him. The lamp on the altar is lit now. It burns sesame oil, the standard lamp fuel of the Song household, fragrant and steady, a small ceramic vessel with a wick of twisted cotton thread. The flame is modest, but in the near dark of the early evening, it is enough to make the room warm with its color. Everything sesame oil illuminates has a particular quality, a gentle amber, softer than noon, more honest than sunlight. It does not flatter, it simply shows. Sit in the main hall for a moment. Let your shoulders come down. The sounds of the lane outside are beginning to change. During the day, the lane is busy with foot traffic, merchants and servants, and the occasional official on horseback, sedan chairs carried by bearers, children running where there is space between adult legs. Now the children are being called in, and the foot traffic is lightening, and the sounds that take over are different. The creak of the timber frame above you settling as the air cools, the faint splash and gurgle of the canal 2 lanes away, a neighbor's dog that has started barking at something and will stop in a moment. You are home. The day has been set down at the gate, and the evening is beginning its particular form of gentleness. Chapter 3: The Evening Meal. The smell of cooking has been building in the house for the past hour. It comes from the kitchen at the back of the courtyard, filtered through the open door, mixing with the cooler air of the evening, something warm and savory, and rich with the particular character of sesame and scallion that gives this city's cooking its distinctive quality. Kaifeng in 1050 is a city where eating is a pleasure taken seriously at all levels of society. That great record of northern song, Kaifeng, written by the official after the city was lost to the invaders of the Jin dynasty, remembers the food with the specific clarity of homesickness. He remembered the pastry sellers in the lanes. He remembered the soup vendors. He remembered particular dishes from particular restaurants that no longer exist in a city that no longer exists in the form he knew. and he wrote about them with a grief that only becomes clear when you understand he was writing from exile, in a conquered city that was no longer home, about a world that had been destroyed. We are eating in the household tonight, rather than at the market. Your family eats dinner at home more evenings than not, though the night market is always an option and often a temptation. The cook, a woman who has worked for the household for several years, paid in rice and copper coin, has prepared what is, by the standards of the world in 1050, an excellent meal. In a city with as much commercial food culture as Kaifeng, the household cook occupies a slightly unusual position. She must be good enough to compete with the night markets and proper restaurants that are always an alternative. The food has to be worth staying home for. There is rice, white rice, steamed in a ceramic pot. This is a Song-era middle-class food in the north. Millet was the older staple of the north, but rice has been moving northward with trade and with taste, and in a merchant household in the capital of the empire, it has displaced the coarser grains to a secondary role. The rice is in a ceramic serving bowl with a blue-white glaze, shallow-rimmed, functional and elegant, without being ostentatious. There is a clay pot of braised pork, a long-cooked preparation, the meat falling off the bone, flavored with soy paste and rice wine and star anise, and the particular sweetness that slow fat renders into. Pork is the meat of the Song urban household. Kaifeng had slaughterhouses at the city's edge, and the canal system that brought grain and silk and lacquerware also brought livestock into the city. In the night market a few streets away, right now, vendors are already selling pork skewers and pork buns, steam rising in white plumes into the evening air. But tonight, here in the house, the pork has been cooked low and slow since the late afternoon, and the smell of it has been curling through the courtyard for the past hour. There are pickled vegetables, shredded cabbage in rice vinegar, a small dish of pickled radish, both sharp and cold against the richness of the meat. There is a ceramic jar of yellow wine, warming gently in a pot of heated water beside the brazier in the main hall. Yellow rice wine, fermented from glutinous rice, amber-colored, mildly alcoholic, with a warm and slightly sweet character that suits the cooling evening. The family gathers in the main hall, seated on the low chairs that are one of the visible signs of the Song dynasty's modernity. The Tang dynasty before them often sat on floor mats, in the older style that connects back to ancient China's seating customs. The Song, with their urban prosperity and commercial exchange, have moved more completely to seated furniture. Low chairs, small tables, a posture that is upright but not rigid. This is a tiny domestic revolution, so small it barely appears in the histories, but it is a genuine change in how the body relates to the room. You eat with porcelain chopsticks, not lacquered wood, though those exist and are used, but the smooth white ceramic ones that your household uses for everyday meals. Song Dynasty porcelain is among the finest ceramics in the world at this time. The kilns of the ware, the Dingware, the Junware, these names are still spoken by collectors 8 and 9 centuries later with something close to reverence. Your everyday bowls are not imperial ware, but they are beautiful. A clean celadon glaze on a pale body, simple and correct. The conversation at the table is a domestic conversation, about the day, about the business, about the neighbor who is building an extension to his workshop that encroaches slightly on the lane, and whether anything should be said. Your daughter, who is perhaps 10 or 11, is reciting something she learned today from the tutor your family pays 3 days a week, a poem, one of the classical pieces that educated children in Song China memorized as part of the basic furniture of the mind. You can hear her voice moving through the poem, unself-conscious, a little fast but accurate. The words are old. The poem has been in circulation for 300 years. The yellow wine goes around twice. The rice is eaten to the last grain, the way rice is always eaten in this household. The pickled cabbage is sharp and restorative against the richness of everything else. There is a second kind of food on the table that deserves a moment. The small ceramic dish of fermented black soybean paste, brought to the table in a tiny covered vessel and placed at the center so that anyone can add a little to their bowl as they like. Fermentation is central to Song Dynasty cooking in a way that is sometimes overlooked when people think about what distinguished Chinese food at this period. The soybeans have been aged in salt and thyme until they are soft and deeply savory, complex in a way that simple seasoning cannot achieve. A small amount is enough. The flavor travels through the broth of the pork, changes it, gives it a darkness and a depth that the pork and soy and anise alone would not produce. This is cooking that understands the long transformation, that salt and thyme will do what heat cannot. Your daughter has finished her recitation of the poem. Your father, at the head of the table, has complimented her and corrected one word, the third character of the second line, which she has been mispronouncing in a way that inverts the tone, changing the meaning from the word that means returning to the word that means something else entirely. She accepts the correction without distress. She is used to her grandfather's exactness. It is one of the things that will help her in life, whether she knows it or not. Outside, the evening is deepening. The lamp on the altar burns its steady, warm flame. The cook has gone to her room behind the kitchen. The courtyard holds a small silence broken only by the sound of the canal and the distant, comfortable sounds of a city that has no intention of going to sleep. Chapter 4. The Drum Tower Speaks. At some point in every evening in Kaifeng, the drums speak. You hear them before you know what they are, a deep, resonant boom that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, traveling through the timber frame of the house and the cool air above the courtyard and the surface of the canal water alike. It is not a single drum. It is the great drum in the drum tower at the center of the city, amplified by the night and by the attentive silence that precedes it, and repeated by the smaller drum towers at each of the city's major gates, and relayed again by the ward keepers with their handheld drums moving through the residential lanes. The time system of Song Dynasty Kaifeng is layered and elegant. The day is divided into 12 double hours, each equivalent to 2 of our hours, and each named after one of the 12 earthly branches of the Chinese zodiac cycle: Yin, Mao, Si, Wu, Wei, Shen, Yu, Su. Each double hour is subdivided into an initial part and a central part, giving 24 named time points in the day. The night itself is divided into 5 watches, the 5 each roughly 2 hours long, running from roughly 7 in the evening through until 5 in the morning. The first watch sounded around what we would call 7 in the evening. This is the second watch, something close to 9 o'clock. The drum that you hear now is announcing the middle of the evening, the transition point from the early night into the deeper night. In older Chinese cities under the old curfew system, this would have been the signal for markets to close and for people to be off the streets and behind their ward gates. In Kaifeng in 1050, it is simply a clock striking. The markets continue. The entertainments continue. The vendors continue. But in your house, the drum's voice carries weight. Your younger children should be in bed by now. The older ones, your son, perhaps 15, already thinking about the examinations he will attempt in a few years, can stay up longer if they are studying. Your father, the head of the household, retires earlier than he once did, his knees troubling him since the winter before last. The household takes the drum as a kind of orientation point, a signal that the evening's business is roughly half done. Before the Song Dynasty had its drum towers, it had Song's water clock. Or rather, the water clock came during the Song. In 1088 AD, the polymath and imperial officials Song designed and built an astronomical clock tower for the emperor here in Kaifeng that was approximately 12 meters tall. It was driven entirely by water power, with a water wheel that turned a series of gears and escapement mechanisms not entirely unlike what later clockmakers in Europe would independently invent centuries later. The clock tower showed the time of day, the day of the month, the phase of the moon, and the positions of the stars and planets, and it sounded bells and drums and moved wooden figures at the correct hours. It was, by any measure, one of the most complex machines on Earth in the year it was built. Most households did not have water clocks. What most households had, particularly in temples and scholarly homes, was something simpler and more intimate: the incense clock. A stick of incense of known length, or a coiled incense rope, or a wooden tray with a channel of incense dust laid out in a specific pattern. These burned at consistent rates and told the time through the twin senses of smell and sight. The ash moved forward at a known pace. When the incense had burned to a certain mark, a certain amount of time had passed. Metal seal stamps with perforated tops were used to make elaborate patterns in powdered incense, so that when lit, the burn traveled along the pattern at a measured rate. In the study upstairs, there is a stick of incense burning right now. Your father placed it before supper. It will burn for another half hour or so. When it is done, he will know without lifting his head from whatever he is reading that the time has reached a certain point. This domestication of time reflects something important about Song Kaifeng. The commercial revolution that drove the open night market also required that ordinary people know what time it was. A market city that operates after dark needs its participants on roughly the same schedule. The drum tower is therefore a piece of urban infrastructure as surely as the canal is the shared clock of a city that requires coordination to function. The drum subsides. Its vibration stays in the air for a moment, that peculiar quality that large drums have of outlasting their own sound, a resonance in the chest cavity that seems to come from inside rather than outside. Then it is done, and the night reasserts itself, and the canal water and the distant voices of the quarter resume. Time in Kaifeng is not owned by the wealthy or the official. The drum tower makes its announcements for everyone. A city of 1 million people, all oriented by the same sound, all knowing within a narrow margin what hour it is. There is something equalizing about a public clock, even a drum. The servant and the minister hear the same stroke, and they hear it in the same city, which is worth remembering. The social classes of Song Kaifeng were real and consequential. The scholar officials above the merchants above the artisans above the peasants, and various other groups distributed through and around these categories. But in the physical streets, in the lanes and the markets and the entertainment districts, those hierarchies were compressed by proximity. The night market did not have a section for officials and a section for commoners. It had stalls and people and food for whoever had the copper coins to buy it. The drum tower spoke to all of them equally. Chapter 5: Gardenia Lanterns. Come outside with me for a little while. The lane in front of your house runs roughly east to west, and at its western end, it crosses a narrow humpbacked stone bridge over the canal. The canal is one of the smaller arteries branching off the Great Canal that connects Kaifeng to the Grand Canal network and through it to the whole river system of central China. This small canal, perhaps 4 meters across, moves with a dark and purposeful slowness that all canals have, a current that is barely perceptible but constant, carrying the city's commerce in one direction and its reflections in another. What you see when you step outside at this hour, in the second watch of an autumn evening in Kaifeng around 10:50, is a street lit with more deliberate, varied light than almost any other city on earth could offer at this moment. The most striking are the Gardenia Lanterns. These are exactly what their name suggests, lanterns shaped in the form of the gardenia flower, constructed from red yarn wound and stretched over a bamboo or wire frame until the shape is achieved, the petals suggested by the overlapping arrangement of the cord. Inside each lantern, a candle. From a distance, the Gardenia Lanterns are a warm, reddish-orange cluster of light, the yarn softening the candles' glow into something diffuse and floral, the red of them against the darkness of the lane giving the street a quality that is both festive and intimate. The Gardenia Lanterns are popular for commerce. Outside the door of the hostelry at the end of the lane, 2 of them hang from wooden poles, large and showy, visible for 50 meters. They advertise the establishment's presence through pure warmth. They say, without words, shelter is here, rest is here, comfort is here. The hostelry itself has a sign, a painted board with characters, and beside the sign, a hollow box containing a candle, so that the sign is readable at night. The candle inside the sign box illuminates the characters from behind, the light catching the painted surface and throwing it outward. This is perhaps the world's earliest form of a backlit sign, though no one here would describe it in those terms. It is simply a sensible way to keep your shop's name visible after dark. Farther down the lane, where it widens slightly before the canal bridge, the lamp sellers have their area. They sell their wares until well into the evening, and the variety of lanterns hanging from their display poles is considerable. Round paper lanterns painted with peonies, silk lanterns with painted scenes, small ceramic oil lamps in the shape of fish or lotus flowers, simple rush lights in clay holders for the households that need light without expense. The lamp sellers have been in business since when the household servants come to buy what is needed for the evening. By now they are selling mostly to the who need a lamp for the journey home. The bridge at the canal is marked by stone lanterns on its parapets, simple upright posts with a flat stone top, and a small ceramic oil lamp burning in the shelter beneath. These are public lights. In the accounting records of the Song City administration, those extraordinary documents that somehow survived, there are references to public lighting maintenance in the city's commercial districts. Someone is responsible for keeping those bridge lanterns filled and burning. Someone checks them on a regular schedule. Public street lighting is not an accident in Kaifeng. It is a policy, a governed and maintained system, because a lit city is a safer city, a commercially active city, a city where things can happen after the sun has gone. The canal water below the bridge catches all of this light in its slow, dark surface and doubles it. The Gardenia Lanterns appear again as a wavering double below their solid selves, orange on black, shifting slightly with the current. The stone lanterns appear again, steadier, their reflections stretching and distorting only when a canal boat passes and sends a ripple running down the surface. Stand on the bridge for a moment. The smell of the evening air here is specific and worth attending to. Wood smoke from a dozen household fires settling as the night cools. The particular sweet oily smell of candles and sesame oil burning in 100 lanterns. The damp vegetable smell of the canal, not unpleasant. The smell of moving water in an urban channel, organic and alive. And very faintly, from the lane to the south where a food vendor has set up his charcoal brazier, the smell of fat dripping onto hot coals, of skewered meat in the turning air. There are also, noticeably, no mosquitoes near the densest clusters of commercial candles. The burning wax and oil in the downtown district creates, as a practical side effect, a kind of repellent fog. The smell is mild and warm. The insects find it disagreeable. A woman in a dark outer robe crosses the bridge ahead of you, a small paper lantern on a stick held low at her side, its light moving ahead of her feet. A man in a scholar's hat with the characteristic long wings at either side, the distinctive Song official headgear, the Mao, stands at the edge of the lane talking to another man, their voices low, both of them turned slightly away from the lamplight, as if they want their conversation to be private, but have not thought to find a darker corner for it. A canal boat has appeared, moving eastward through the bridge opening, low in the water with cargo, perhaps grain, perhaps baled silk, perhaps the dyed cloth that comes up from the workshops in the southern part of the city. A single lantern hangs from the bow post, a simple oil lamp in a bamboo frame, swinging very slightly with the motion of the vessel. The boatman stands at the stern with a long pole, steering. He does not look up as he passes under the bridge. He has passed under this bridge before and will again, and the bridge has nothing to tell him that the water does not. The boats that move through this canal at night are part of a system that contemporary visitors from other parts of the world found almost incomprehensible in its scale. Song China's internal trade network was arguably the most sophisticated on Earth at this time. Goods from Fujian in the southeast reached Kaifeng in a matter of weeks by canal. Silk from Sichuan traveled east to the coast and north up the rivers. Coal from the mines northeast of the capital arrived by barge on the very canal you are watching. The commercial revolution that made Kaifeng's open night possible, that created the tax revenues that funded the fire brigade, and the drum towers and the public lanterns, was built on water. It floated into the city every day and night in the form of the low-lying cargo boats moving through the lamplight. Chapter 6: The Night Market. Let us go a little further. 3 lanes to the south, the street opens into one of the city's informal market areas, not one of the official, fixed-location markets that operate under city permits during the daytime, but the kind of spontaneous-seeming aggregation that forms each evening in certain streets of Kaifeng, the food vendors and the stall keepers appearing as if by arrangement, as if the street itself had called them. They have, in a sense, arranged it, the same vendors in the same positions most evenings, so that the customers know where to find them. What you smell first is steam. Song Dynasty urban cooking makes enormous use of steam. Bamboo steaming baskets stacked 4 and 5 high over clay or iron pots of boiling water, the steam rising in continuous white columns, visible from a distance and detectable before the food itself can be seen. In the steaming baskets tonight, bao, the filled dumplings that a later period will call baozi, and that will persist in Chinese cooking for a millennium without substantial change, round, white, closed at the top with a pleated twist, filled with pork and ginger and green onion. They are being sold for 2 or 3 copper coins apiece, which is an ordinary transaction, the kind that happens several hundred times in this lane on an evening like this. Thee remembers the specifics of night market food with affection and precision. Wrote about the pork pastries, the chicken soup, the fried dough twists, the sweet rice cakes, the sugared hawthorn berries on sticks, the warmth of the vendor stalls in the evening air. His memory of the food is the memory of comfort. It comes from a time when he could no longer eat any of it, and the writing of it down was an act of mourning as much as documentation. We owe him a great deal. Near the pastry vendor, a soup stall. A large clay pot sits on a low brazier, the soup inside thick and aromatic a pork bone stock that has been simmering since midday, with winter melon and preserved vegetables, and a small knot of dried tofu that has absorbed the flavors over hours of slow heat. Ceramic bowls are filled and handed across the counter in exchange for copper coins, and the buyers drink standing up, or find the low wooden benches that are arranged nearby for that purpose, and sit for a few minutes with the bowl warm between their palms. The currency in use here is worth a note. Kaifeng in this period is a place of commercial sophistication that the rest of the world will not match for centuries. Copper cash coins are the everyday currency, round, with a square hole through the center, strung on cords for ease of carrying. A simple meal like this might cost 3 or 5 copper coins. A larger expense, a meal at one of the established restaurants in the commercial district, might run to several hundred. And for the largest transactions, the merchants of Song China have already invented paper money. Though the world's first government-issued paper currency was formalized by the Song government around 1024 AD, a generation before our evening. For everyday night market transactions, it is the copper coin, heavy and real in the palm. But paper money exists and is in use, and the world will not invent it again independently for several more centuries. The variety of the people in this market is worth attending to. Kaifeng in 1050 is a city of extraordinary social mixture. at least in the public streets. You see a group of Buddhist monks in saffron yellow robes, their heads shaved, moving in a close cluster past a wine stall, not purchasing anything but looking, or perhaps they will purchase something, because monks in Song China are not as separate from the commercial world as their robes might suggest. You see a soldier from the Imperial Guard, off-duty, in ordinary civilian clothes but recognizable by his bearing, buying a skewer of grilled pork from a vendor. You see servants from a wealthy household sent out to buy something specific, negotiating with a seller over the price of a particular item with the focused confidence of people who negotiate on behalf of others and know what they are doing. You see scholars, two of them in plain but well-made robes, their ink-stained hands the only sign of their occupation, stopping at a bookstall where woodblock printed texts are laid out on a cloth. Books. At a night market stall, this is one of those details that requires a moment to absorb. Bai Sheng, a commoner artisan, had invented movable type printing between 1039 and 1048 AD, a generation before our evening. His invention used fired clay tiles, one character per tile, that could be set in rows and pressed to make pages and then redistributed and reset for the next printing. The invention was documented by the great polymath Shen in his notebook, the Dream Pool Essays, written around 1088 AD. Before movable type, books were already becoming more affordable in Song China through improved woodblock printing. After movable type, they become even more so. Books circulate, texts spread. The scholarship of the Song Dynasty is not locked behind the walls of libraries accessible only to officials. It moves through the city. It appears on market stalls. The scholar at the book stall tonight is browsing printed texts as casually as a later century would browse a printed broadsheet. A wine shop has its doors propped open, its interior warm with lamplight, the smell of heated yellow wine drifting into the lane like an invitation. 2 or 3 men sit inside on low chairs, ceramic cups in their hands. From somewhere deeper in the building, the quiet sound of a stringed instrument, a chin or possibly a being played with enough concentration that the player is not paying attention to whether anyone is listening. You buy a bowl of soup. The vendor hands it across without ceremony, the bowl heavy and warm, the steam rising into the cool night air. You stand at the edge of the lane with the bowl between your palms and let the warmth of it travel up your arms. The soup is rich and good. The autumn night is cool but not cold. The lanterns on their poles sway very slightly in a movement of air that is almost too gentle to call a wind. Around you, Kaifeng is doing what it does every night, refusing to stop. Chapter 7: Tea and the Scholar. There is a house on the canal's north bank, 3 streets east of the main market lane, where a light burns late almost every night. The lamp in the upper study window, visible from the canal path as a warm, still rectangle of amber against the dark timber facade, belongs to a scholar official who is perhaps in his late 40s, a man of the civil service class who has passed the imperial examinations and now holds a position in the Bureau of Finance. He reads late. He writes late. His household has learned to leave him alone in the evenings, and his study is his territory after the evening meal is cleared. Tonight he is making tea. This is not a casual gesture. In Song Dynasty China, the preparation and drinking of tea has been elevated into something that we might hesitate to call a ceremony. That word carries its own associations from other traditions, but which is nonetheless a considered practice, with its own vocabulary and its own aesthetics and its own social weight. It is called whisked tea, and it is, in the hands of a practitioner who cares about it, as close to a meditation as any daily activity can be. He begins with a brick of compressed tea. Song Dynasty tea is not yet the loose-leaf tea that later Chinese practice will make familiar, not yet the of ceremony cups and repeated pours. It is compressed, the tea leaves, picked at the right moment and processed in the right way, are pressed into dense cakes or bricks that can be stored for months without degrading. From the brick, he breaks a measured piece and grinds it on a small stone grinding dish, using a ceramic grinder, working the piece of tea until it is a fine dark powder. The powder is the color of very dark moss. It smells when he leans in close, which he does out of habit, like something between grass and earth, with a bitterness underneath that is not unpleasant. The water has been heated in a small iron kettle on a portable brazier beside the desk. The correct temperature for is not boiling. Boiling water is too aggressive. It destroys what you are trying to do. The Song tea texts that survive are specific about this. The water should have the small bubbles that form just before a full boil, what the texts describe as crab eyes or fish eyes, the water alive and moving but not yet fully turbulent. The scholar has heated water this way hundreds of times. He knows the sound of it, a particular low hiss that builds, and the way the kettle begins to shift very slightly on its stand when the convection inside becomes strong enough. He takes it off the heat at the right moment without thinking about it, into a small ceramic bowl, and the bowl matters enormously here. He places a small amount of the powdered tea, then a very small amount of hot water, just enough to wet the powder completely and work it into a smooth, even paste with his bamboo whisk. This paste stage is critical. If the paste has lumps, the final tea will be inferior. He works it deliberately, the whisk moving in small circles until the paste is smooth and dark and glossy. Then more water, added slowly while whisking. The bamboo whisk, though the song would use a different term for it, is a delicate instrument. Its tines split from a single piece of bamboo into dozens of fine parallel strips, flexible enough to move through the liquid without breaking it. He whisks in a quick, light motion, the wrist doing the work, and as more water is added, the color of the liquid changes from dark paste to something lighter, and the surface begins to show the froth. The froth is everything in, a thick, stable white froth, completely covering the surface of the liquid, sustained and fine-bubbled. This is the mark of a well-prepared bowl. The Song tea aesthetes competed over froth. There were formal tea competitions in the northern Song court and in scholarly circles where the quality of the froth, its color, its stability, how long it held before subsiding, was judged with the seriousness that a later age would bring to wine. The bowl he is using tonight is a ware bowl from Fujian province in the south, a word that Japanese Buddhist monks will bring back from their visits to Song China, naming it for a mountain where they saw such bowls used in monasteries. The glaze is the darkest possible black with, in the right light, hints of deep rust brown, and in the thickest parts of the glaze pooling toward the foot, a near black that is almost absolute. Against this darkness, the white froth of the is luminous. The contrast is the point. The dark bowl makes the white froth more white. The froth makes the bowl's darkness more complete. They are composed against each other, the way a painter composes dark against light. He takes the bowl in both hands, drinks slowly. The taste is bitter first, then sweet, the sweetness that emerges after bitterness in good tea, the aftertaste that lingers for a minute or more. He sets the bowl down, looks at the scroll of text open on his desk, picks up his brush. The ink on the stone beside the candle has not dried. For a few minutes, the only sounds in the study are the faint scratching of the brush on paper and the distant, comfortable murmur of the city beyond the closed shutters. The lamp burns. The incense stick on its tray has half an hour left in it. The tea bowl cools. This is the interior of a Song Dynasty scholar's evening. It is not extraordinary by his own reckoning. This is what he does most evenings when the work allows. But in another sense, it represents something that the world in 1050 has almost nowhere else. A man of government, in a prosperous city, spending his private time reading printed books, drinking carefully prepared tea from fine ceramics, and writing by lamplight in a system of calligraphy that is both a medium of communication and an art form in itself. The Song Dynasty made this life possible in a way and at a scale that no earlier Chinese dynasty had quite managed. It is one reason historians speak of the Song as a period of particular cultural achievement, not military achievement, not territorial expansion, but the specific flowering that happens when commerce and printing and examination-based meritocracy combine in a city large enough to generate genuine cultural mass. He reads until the incense is half gone. Then he sets down his brush, finishes the last of the cool tea in the bowl, and sits for a moment looking at nothing in particular. Outside, the drum tower will sound the third watch before long. Chapter 8: The Pleasure Quarter. There is a district to the northeast of the city center that becomes, in the evening hours, the most densely populated square of ground in an already extraordinarily dense city. It is called an entertainment district, is the closest translation, though that phrase in a modern context implies something too neon, too transactional. The is more organic than that. It grew over decades as vendors and performers and establishments clustered together in the areas near the city's commercial heart, where foot traffic was heaviest, and the money that could be shaken loose from an evening crowd was most abundant. Within are the enclosed theater structures, some of them quite large, with walls of timber and paper and cloth, seating areas of tiers and benches, and performance spaces at the center. In Kaifeng at this period, more than 50 such structures exist, ranging from small venues where a single storyteller performs to the great that can seat several thousand people at once. The historian Stephen West, writing about the performing arts of northern Song China, described the of Kaifeng as the world's first real entertainment industry, a commercial conglomerate bringing together theater, music, storytelling, food, and other pleasures under one social roof. You are at the edge of the now, standing at the entrance to one of its narrower lanes. The first thing you hear, before you see anything clearly, is the storyteller's drum. It is a distinctive sound, a hand drum, not large, struck with a flat palm and then with the fingers in a rapid pattern that creates a rhythm both driving and variable, the punctuation of a spoken narrative. The storytellers, men, people who tell history and legend and invented tale, use the drum to mark the beats of their stories, to signal excitement, to create suspense, to bring the audience to silence just before a crucial moment. This one is working from inside one of the smaller structures to your left, his voice audible over the drum if you listen for it. A rapid, precise, emphatic voice moving through a story that you can only partially follow from here, but whose emotional shape, rising tension, a pause, a dramatic declaration, the drum striking hard, is completely clear. Further in, a larger venue. Through the cloth wall you can see the faint, warm glow of its interior lighting, and through a gap near the entrance, if you stand at the right angle, you can see the screen. Shadow puppet theater by the Song Dynasty has become the most popular performing art in China. The screen is a large rectangle of white cloth or oiled paper stretched taut across a wooden frame, illuminated from behind by candles or oil lamps. The intensity of the light behind the screen determines how clearly the puppets' silhouettes appear. The puppets themselves are cut from hide or leather and attached to thin rods, jointed at knees and elbows and wrists, so that they move with extraordinary articulation. The puppeteers stand behind the screen in the lamplight, operating the figures above their own heads, voices accompanying the movements. From this side of the screen, you see only the shadows. Figures in profile, intensely articulated against the lit cloth, moving through a story, a warrior in full armor raising a spear, a court figure making a formal bow, a demon with exaggerated curved horns gesturing in threat. The audience, seated in the darkness on the other side of the screen from the puppeteers, sees exactly what you see. The shadows are sharp-edged and compelling. Children in the front rows are absolutely still, which is the highest compliment a performance can receive. There are acrobats working in the open area near the central lane of the 2 or 3 of them. A family perhaps, performing on a small platform with a crowd gathered around. One is balancing on the shoulders of another, slowly, with the particular held breath concentration of people doing something that requires everything they have. A third is juggling ceramic plates with that deceptive ease that masters develop over years. The plates rising and falling in controlled arcs, occasionally spinning off at an angle that looks like disaster and resolving back into the pattern just when the crowd's collective exhale begins. The performers are in the larger, at the north end of the lane. A comic drama, roughly, a form that blends music and speech and comic exaggeration into performances that can last an hour or more, is popular with all social classes. The performers tonight are doing something that makes the audience laugh loudly in regular bursts. The laughter carries through the wall and out into the lane with a warmth that is contagious even without the joke. You do not know what the joke is, but you can feel the wave of collective pleasure from 20 meters away. It is worth staying here for a moment, even as an observer, even if you do not know the language or the story. There is something specifically human about a crowd laughing together in a lit space while the city moves in the dark outside. The entertainment district of Kaifeng in 1050 is a physical argument against the idea that human beings are solitary or that pleasure is a luxury. This is not a pleasure available only to the wealthy. The copper coin entry fee tour is within reach of servants and soldiers and small traders. The theater is for the city, and the city comes. A tea house at the corner, where the lane opens slightly, is doing good business. Men and women both, sitting on low stools with ceramic cups, talking, not theater, not performance, just company and warm tea and the particular pleasure of being together in a lit space when the night is cool outside. Tea houses in Song, China serve a social function that extends well beyond the tea itself. They are places to exchange news, to conduct informal business, to play board games, to listen to music, to argue about politics. In a city of 1 million people, where formal social institutions are organized around hierarchy and examination rank, the tea house is one of the places where the city mixes most freely. From somewhere above the rooftops to the north, a plume of darker smoke than usual. Someone's brazier, perhaps, burning too hot, or a kitchen fire in the restaurant district that is already being managed. The smoke dissolves quickly into the night air, and the continues uninterrupted. Chapter 9: The River at Night. Walk south from down through the quieter lanes that connect the entertainment district to the Canal network, and you reach this is not a small canal. The river, though river is slightly misleading for what is partly a canal, a waterway engineered over centuries to carry the commerce of the empire into the capital, is perhaps 40 meters wide at its broadest point through the city, and its current at this hour is a slow, purposeful movement of dark water. The banks are faced with stone and timber in the commercial sections near the city center. Lanterns on the bridge parapets and on the mooring posts cast their light down onto the surface, and the surface returns it, doubled and wavering, a second city of lights floating just below the first. The painting, you may know if you have encountered Chinese art at all, is along the river during the festival, painted around 1120 AD, perhaps 70 years after our evening. It shows the in daylight during a festival day, alive with boats and crowds and the specific chaotic vitality of a city in motion. We know it is roughly correct in its details because it was painted within living memory of the city by someone who knew the city. What we are seeing tonight is the same river, the same banks, the same bridge profile, but in darkness and without the festival crowds, and with everything softened and deepened by the night. A cargo boat is passing through the bridge now, its progress deliberate and unhurried, a flat-bottomed vessel sitting low with its load. The boatman at the stern is using a long sweep oar to keep it on course through the central arch of the bridge, leaning slightly with each stroke, his weight a counterbalance to the water's lateral push. A lantern hangs from the bow post, a bamboo-framed oil lamp, its light falling ahead of the boat onto the dark water, showing the boat where the water is going. 2 members of the crew are at the bow, using long poles to fend off from the stone piers if the current pushes them too close. These cargo boats are the circulatory system of the empire. What they carry has come from enormous distances. Silk from the weaving districts of Sichuan and 1,000 kilometers south. Salt from the coastal salt flats to the east, controlled by the government salt monopoly. Grain, rice from the fertile Yangtze Delta region, transported north to feed a capital city that is too far north to grow enough rice locally for its 1 million residents. Coal from the mines northeast of the city, Song Kaifeng is, by the standards of this time, a city that burns a surprising amount of coal, not just wood, and the coal smoke it generates gives the city a particular atmospheric quality on cold evenings, a denser, slightly sulfurous edge to the air that is different from the wood smoke of other cities. Ceramic goods moved very carefully in straw packing, bronze objects, lacquerware in sealed containers, printed books, perhaps, in oilcloth wrapping. Tea bricks from Fujian or Sichuan, destined for the tea merchants of the capital. Medicine, herbs, dried preparations, mineral compounds from the pharmaceutical districts of cities along the canal route. Is the artery through which all of this flows into Kaifeng, and the goods of Kaifeng flow out. Without this canal, the city could not exist at its current size. 1 million people need food, and the food has to come from somewhere, and it comes on boats like this one, moving through the dark water at the second watch, its crew working in near silence, the city glowing faintly on the banks above them. The water at the bank has a smell, fresh mud and canal grass, and the organic river bottom richness that is common to all slow-moving urban waterways, the product of silt and the city's various effluents settling into a specific ecology at the margin between land and water. It is not an unpleasant smell, not exactly, though it has depth to it. It is the smell of a living system, of water that is working, that is doing its job of connection and transport and accumulation. A family of ducks has tucked themselves against the reeds at the near bank, sleeping in a huddled mass. They do not stir as the cargo boat passes. They have learned, presumably, that the passage of boats in the night is not a threat. Above the water, the stars. In a city of this density and commercial activity, with its hundreds of lanterns and cooking fires and workshop flames, there is always some degree of light in the sky above Kaifeng at night, a faint ambient glow that reduces the sharpness of the stars directly overhead. But away from the densest district, along the canal bank, where the buildings step back and the open water extends, the sky above the river is relatively clear. And the song sky of 1050 is not the compromised sky of a later century. There are no gas lights, no electric lights, no ground-level industrial illumination. What exists is organic and candle-scaled. The stars above the tonight are real stars, in real numbers, the same stars that the astronomer in Song's clock tower is cataloging and marking with his instruments. The canal water carries the stars' reflections for a moment before the next boat passes and breaks them. Chapter 10: Spirits and Incense. Back inside now, the night has passed its midpoint. The house is settling into its deeper quiet. In the main hall, the altar shelf is the last bright thing. The lamp is burning lower now. It has been burning since dusk, several hours, and the sesame oil in the small ceramic vessel is running down toward its base. It will need refilling before morning. But for now it burns, and by its light the ancestor tablets stand in their row as they always do, their inscribed characters slightly harder to read in the lower light, but no less present for that. This is the moment for incense. The burning of incense before the ancestors before sleep is a regular practice in Song Dynasty households, not a grand ceremony, not a complicated ritual, but a daily act of attention, the way you might speak briefly to someone you care about before leaving the room. The incense is a stick of or sandalwood or a blended compound. The trade in incense ingredients through the Song Dynasty's commercial networks has made a variety of incenses available at different price points, from the expensive imported that wealthy households burn at important occasions to the simpler compound sticks that ordinary households buy in bundles from the market. You hold the stick to the altar lamp flame. The tip catches and glows, a small bright point that dims as you lift the stick away, replaced by the ember of burning incense and the first thin thread of smoke rising from it in the still air of the main hall. The smoke moves upward without hesitation. The air in the hall is calm enough, the lamp flame steady enough, that the incense smoke rises in an almost perfectly vertical line before dispersing above head height. The smell of sandalwood or incense is difficult to describe to someone who does not know it. It is dry and warm and has a quality that suggests age, that suggests wood and earth, and something slightly sweet and something slightly bitter all at once. It is not a floral smell. It does not resemble anything growing. It is paradoxically a smell that seems to come from a great distance, as if the smoke carries within it the memory of the forest where the tree grew, the country from which the wood was traded, the hands that prepared it. It is the smell of connection between you and your ancestors, between the household and the larger world beyond the walls. You place the incense stick in the small ceramic holder on the altar shelf. It will burn for another half hour or so, the thin line of smoke curling upward steadily, carrying whatever it carries to wherever such things are thought to go. Song Dynasty people understood the night to be a different kind of place than the day. Not necessarily a dangerous place. Kaifeng's open, commercial night made the dark streets a space of pleasure as much as threat, but a place with different inhabitants, different rules, different attention from the spirits that animate and observe the world. The same city that built a fire brigade of 2,000 soldiers and a water-powered astronomical clock also hung paper amulets at its doors and burned incense for ancestors who were present and attentive. These are not contradictions in a Song Dynasty worldview. They are different layers of the same protective system, the physical and the spiritual working alongside each other, each doing what the other cannot. Folk belief in Song China was a layered, pragmatic, and in many ways non-exclusive tradition. Buddhist cosmology coexisted with Taoist spirit beliefs, with Confucian ancestor practices, with local land gods and city gods and household guardians, and the elaborate system of bureaucratic spirits who were understood to report on human behavior to a divine administration not entirely unlike the earthly one. The kitchen god Jun was one of these, a spirit resident in the household, specifically in the kitchen stove, who observed everything that happened in the home and made an annual report to the Jade Emperor. He was treated with care and occasional gifts, because a bad report from the kitchen god could bring misfortune. A household that burned incense and behaved well within its walls was a household that was covered in this regard. The land god of the ward, Gong, was responsible for the area around the house, the lane, the canal, the immediate neighborhood. He too was attentive, and small shrines to Gong dotted the lanes of Kaifeng at regular intervals, the tiny ceramic or stone figures receiving small offerings from the residents of their areas. But at night specifically, the boundaries between the ordinary world and the world of spirits were understood to be thinner. Certain demons operated specifically in darkness, entities that could steal the sacrificial offerings meant for ancestors before the ancestors could receive them, entities that were drawn by neglect or by the specific kind of spiritual untidiness that comes from failing to maintain the household's ritual obligations. Paper amulets from this period, printed from wood blocks, were placed in doors and windows and under sleeping mats, simple protective texts or diagrams that the print revolution had made accessible to ordinary households who could not previously afford hand charms. None of this is experienced by the people who hold these beliefs as frightening. It is experienced as practical. The spirit world is, in this cosmology, an administration. It has procedures. It responds to correct procedure. Keep the altar clean, burn the incense, make the proper offerings at the proper seasons, maintain the household's spiritual paperwork, and you will be covered. The Song household goes to sleep under a layered protection. The physical walls, the screen wall at the gate, the altar in the main hall, the kitchen guard in the stove, the ward guard in the lane, the printed amulets at the doors. The incense smoke rises in the still air. In Chapter 11, The Fire Watch. At some point in the deep middle of the night, footsteps, not alarming footsteps, not the fast, purposeful footsteps of someone running, steady, measured footsteps on the packed earth of the lane outside, accompanied by the faint creak of a lantern on its pole. A voice, equally measured, calling a phrase that every Kaifeng resident knows, a kind of call and response between the watchman and the sleeping city, a reminder that someone is awake and attentive while everyone else is resting. This is the fire watch. Kaifeng's relationship with fire is one of the most important and least comfortable facts of its existence. The city is built almost entirely of timber. 1 million people live and cook and heat their homes and light their lamps in a city of wooden buildings placed close together, divided by water but not protected by it, in a climate that includes dry autumn and winter months when fire moves with terrifying speed. Every major city of this period and type knows fire as an existential threat, and Kaifeng knows it better than most. The Song government's response was, by the standards of the world in 1050, extraordinary in its systematic ambition. Kaifeng maintained a fire brigade of approximately 2,000 soldiers stationed at 14 fire stations positioned across the city. These were not volunteers. They were trained, salaried, organized military units whose assignment was specifically fire suppression, not policing, not guarding the walls, not tax collection, but fire. The specialization itself is remarkable. Medieval European cities of this period had no equivalent. When a fire broke out in London or Paris or Cologne in the 11th century, the response was largely spontaneous. Neighbors with buckets, prayer, and the hope that the wind would shift. Kaifeng had a system. This is a remarkable investment. 2,000 trained soldiers whose entire purpose is fire suppression, in a city whose total population is perhaps 1 million. The fire stations were equipped with ladders, hooks, water containers, sand, and the teams of men trained to use them. Watchtowers were built at intervals through the residential and commercial districts, with lookouts stationed to observe the city from above, to see the first rise of smoke before it became an unstoppable column of fire. A survivor account from this period describes the watchtower lookouts. Men posted at height, day and night, scanning the city's roofline. When smoke was spotted, they would signal its direction and apparent intensity by a system of flags or lanterns, and the nearest fire station would respond. The speed of response mattered enormously in a city of timber. In a high wind, fire could travel a city block in minutes. The wooden buildings themselves were sometimes designed with this in mind. The roof tiles of more elaborate structures were curved and overlapping in ways that slowed fire's travel along the roofline. Some of the wealthiest establishments maintained their own firefighting equipment. The water in the canal network was, theoretically, available for fire suppression, though moving large quantities of water quickly in a dense urban environment presented its own challenges. The soldier walking your lane tonight with his lantern is doing something that looks, in its domestic form, like a very small thing. A man with a lamp, walking slowly, looking left and right, calling his watch phrase into the sleeping city. But behind his small lamp is the organized infrastructure of a city that has decided its timber buildings are worth the expense of 2,000 professional fire suppression soldiers. In a world where most cities simply hope their fires stop before everything burns, Kaifeng has made a policy decision that feels, from this distance, entirely modern in its logic. He passes your gate. The lamplight slides across the screen wall inside. You can see the edge of the light through the gap at the gate's edge. Then the footsteps continue down the lane. The light moves with them. The voice sounds again, slightly farther now, slightly softer as the distance increases, then farther still, then gone. The lane outside is quiet. The canal makes its sound, that low, continuous movement of water that you have been hearing all evening and that has become, in the way that continuous sounds do, something closer to silence than to noise. The frogs along the bank, which were loud at midnight, have quieted. The food vendors packed up their stalls at the third watch. There has one or two establishments still lit and open, but the crowds have thinned. Kaifeng is not asleep. It is never quite asleep. But it has become quieter. The quality of the sound has changed. From the layered complexity of a city in full commercial operation to the simpler, lower, more restful sound of a city in its domestic hours. Chapter 12. What the Scholar Wrote. Upstairs in the study, the scholar is still awake. He is not reading anymore. He is writing. This is not unusual. Song Dynasty official life generates an enormous quantity of written material, administrative texts, policy proposals, examination responses, official correspondence, and much of the writing is done at home, in the private hours when the office's claims have been temporarily lifted. But what he is writing now is not official. It is a poem. The poem is about tonight, in fact. About the autumn, about the moon, which has risen late, and whose light he can see at the edge of the closed shutter as a thin, horizontal line of silver. About the sound of the canal. About the quality of light in a bowl when it is well made, and the froth is dense and white against the dark glaze. Autumn is the great season of Song Dynasty poetry. The poets of the song, Li, and the many others less famous in the modern world, but equally respected in their time, return to autumn again and again with a consistency that goes beyond mere convention. Autumn in Chinese poetic tradition carries a weight that is specifically melancholic and specifically beautiful. It is the season of things at their most vivid as they prepare to be gone. the chrysanthemums brilliant precisely because frost is coming, the harvest complete, and the fields emptying. The scholar at his desk is working in a tradition that has thought deeply about autumn for centuries. He knows the poets who came before him, describing autumn wind tearing the thatch from his roof, the great Tang masters whose collected works he has read in printed editions on his shelves. He is writing within a living tradition, in dialogue with the dead, as all poets are. Song Dynasty poetry has a vast range, from the formal, compressed excellence of the Ci form, in which poems follow the rhythmic patterns of specific named melodies, and every character's tone must fall in a prescribed way, to the more flexible forms with their parallel couplets, and their long tradition stretching back to the earliest Chinese literature. The scholars of the song know their tradition deeply. They have been formed by it through years of study for the imperial examinations that test knowledge of classical texts and the ability to compose correctly in classical forms. A song scholar who cannot write poetry is almost a contradiction in terms. What made song poetry possible at this particular moment? What made it different from what had come before in Chinese literary culture was partly the printing revolution. Baisheng's movable type and the woodblock printing that preceded it and continued alongside it had made texts accessible in a way that the hand manuscript culture of earlier dynasties could not quite achieve. When books are expensive because each one must be by hand, knowledge concentrates. When books are printed and therefore reproducible and therefore cheaper, knowledge spreads. The imperial examination system of the song, which selected government officials based on competitive examinations in classical learning, not on family background, combined with the printing revolution to create something that had not previously existed, a literate professional class broad enough to constitute a reading public. The scholar at his desk tonight owns more books than any Roman senator owned in their comparable position 1,000 years earlier. His books were printed. They are legible and well-made. He can read the great Tang poets, Li, in editions that were printed here in Kaifeng and carry the words with very high accuracy. He can read the classical texts that he memorized for his examinations and now reads for the pleasure of the language. He has access to medical texts, astronomical texts, agricultural manuals, collections of historical anecdotes, philosophical commentaries. The lamp on his desk is lower now. He will need to add oil soon, or let it burn out and go to bed. He leans close to the paper as he writes, his face near the flame, the brush moving in the controlled, elegant strokes of a man who has spent 30 years practicing calligraphy, because calligraphy is not merely writing in Song China. It is a form of character expression, a way of making the inner self visible in the outward movement of the brush. A good hand reveals a good person. A poor hand reveals a mind that has not disciplined itself sufficiently. This, too, is part of the song examination culture. Calligraphy is judged. The ink he uses is ground from an ink stick, a compressed block of carbon black and glue, ground on the flat surface of an ink stone with a small amount of water, working in slow circles until the water has taken up enough pigment to make ink of the right consistency. The inkstone is one of the 4 implements that Song literary culture called the 4 treasures of the study: inkstone, ink stick, brush, and paper. These four things define the scholar's space. They are the instruments of his work and his art and his identity. The poem is probably not great. Most poems are not great. But it is his, and it is responsive to the specific quality of this particular night, in this particular city, in this particular autumn, and it will exist until the paper it is written on ceases to exist. He sets the brush down, reads what he has written, makes a small change in the third line, reads it again, nods very slightly. Chapter 13. The city goes quiet. The third watch drum sounded an hour ago, or perhaps a little more. You may have heard it in the way you hear distant sound when you are already drowsy, the vibration arriving, registering somewhere just below full consciousness, and then the night closing gently back over it. The is closing. Not all at once. Nothing in Kaifeng happens all at once, but the larger have let out their audiences. The storyteller has stopped his drum. The shadow puppet screen has gone dark. The audience that was laughing at the performers has dispersed back into the lanes, some going home, some stopping at a food stall for one last bowl of something warm, some standing in groups at the edge of the canal lane for a few minutes of conversation before the cold drives them indoors. The food vendors are packing up. The bamboo steaming baskets are stacked and covered. The clay pots of soup are lidded and set beside the extinguished braziers. The pastry seller wraps the remaining unsold buns in cloth and places them in her cart. The soup maker covers his ladle across the top of the pot. The charcoal in the braziers cools from orange to gray to black. The lamp seller took down his display an hour ago, the last of his wares sold or unsold, his pole-mounted lanterns taken in for the night, his own small lamp carried ahead of him down the lane toward home. The Gardenia Lanterns on the hostelry poles still burn, but lower now, the candles inside having consumed most of their mass over the course of the evening, the red yarn glowing around a smaller and less certain flame. The bridges over thee are quiet. An occasional foot traveler crosses, or a night cart carrying some load that the city's daytime density makes impractical to transport during the busier hours, timber, perhaps, or stone, or bales of something wrapped in waterproof cloth. The horses pulling the carts move with the particular patience of animals accustomed to night work, their hooves on the stone bridge surface making a sound that carries in the quiet air. The canal is empty of moving boats now. The cargo vessels are moored for the night at the commercial wharves. The boatmen have settled in their sleeping quarters, small cabins at the stern, just large enough for a man to lie down, the smell of the river always present, and the sound of the water always close. A few of them are awake, sitting on the deck in the quiet, looking at the sky. One of them is eating something from a wrapped cloth, a pastry bought at the market before it closed. The canal water is very still now. In the absence of passing boats, in the near absence of wind, the canal has smoothed its surface into something close to glass. The lantern reflections are steadier, more exact, the doubled image of each light nearly as sharp as the original. The stone bridge piers appear below in their mirror image, reversed. The stars, where the canal water is not lit, appear in clusters and singles, the same stars as above but soft-edged, slightly blurred, moving almost imperceptibly with the last traces of current. Your courtyard is quiet. The stone basin at its center holds a rectangle of sky, a little cloud, a few stars, the black edge of the roofline on three sides. A pot of chrysanthemums is silver-gray in the available light. The flowers closed for the night, the stems very still. The chickens that one of your neighbors keeps have been silent for hours. A cat not yours, a lane cat, one of the dozens that patrol the residential quarters for rats and mice, and whatever else the city's abundance creates sits on your screen wall, absolutely still, looking at something in the lane beyond with the focused, unreadable attention that cats bring to whatever interests them. Inside the main hall, the altar lamp has burned very low. It is guttering slightly, not out yet, but at the point where the flame is no longer steady, where it bends and straightens and bends again with the small movements of air in the room, casting shadows that shift and waver on the walls. In that unsteady light, the ancestor tablets seem to lean slightly, though of course they do not. They stand as they always stand, still and patient. The incense burned out sometime in the past hour. The stick has become a thin line of gray ash that holds its shape for now, vertical and complete in its form, the smoke long gone upward and dissipated into the air of the city. What remains is the ghost of the incense, the smell of sandalwood still present in the room but fading slowly, the way all good smells fade, by becoming part of the room's general character rather than its foreground. Upstairs, the scholar has set down his brush. He did add oil to the lamp, just enough to finish the poem and copy it once cleanly, and then he let it burn out rather than adding more. The study is dark now. He is in bed, which in a northern China merchant household means on the raised sleeping platform built of stone and clay, heated through internal channels by the low fire that has been burning in the kitchen below since the evening meal. That radiates its warmth upward through the sleeping surface. It is gentle heat, not intense. The fire below has been banked to embers, not stoked for cooking. But the stored warmth in the clay structure releases slowly through the night, and that has been properly maintained stays warm until well past midnight. The scholar is lying on his side on a reed mat over the heated clay surface, a wool blanket pulled to his shoulder, his face near the wall. He is thinking about the third line of the poem, which he still suspects is not quite right, but the thought is becoming less precise as sleep approaches it, the line losing its specific shape and becoming something more general, a mood rather than a judgment. He is almost asleep. Chapter 14. Before the Fifth Watch. This is the deep part of the night. Not late night in the sense of what was happening an hour ago, with the last vendors and the crowds and the canal boats moving. This is something different. This is the city having settled into its lowest register, the register it reaches only between the closing of the last entertainment and the opening of the first morning preparations. If you were in the drum tower now and looking out over Kaifeng, what you would see is a city of dark, the characteristic upswept curves of Chinese urban architecture, row after row of them, the canal channels between them catching what light remains, the whole city below you like a dark and ordered garden. A few lights still burn, the hostelry lanterns always, a fire station lamp steady at its post. In a monastery on the western side of the city, where the monks follow a schedule that divides even the night into periods of meditation and rest and brief communal activity, oil lamps burn in the corridors and in the main hall and before the great bronze Buddha that sits at the center of the worship space. The monks who are awake at this hour move quietly through their lamplit world. Their sandals make almost no sound on the stone floors. The incense in the main hall is a coiled rope type. It burns slowly in a long spiral and has been burning since midnight and will continue until dawn. The canal is breathing. This is what it sounds like, not a metaphor exactly, but a description of the quality the water takes on in the deep night when the boats are still and the city is almost silent. The canal breathes, a very slight, very regular movement of the water surface, a lap and settle against the stone facing of the bank, a slow pulse that has something to do with the interaction of the current and the city's weight and the settling of the earth beneath. It is so faint that you can only hear it if you are standing very close, and it is so regular that it barely registers as sound at all. It simply becomes part of the background of being. The stars above Kaifeng tonight are those of a clear northern Chinese autumn night, the Pleiades cluster, which the Chinese tradition calls Mao, standing high above the roofline. Orion rising, the great river of the Milky Way sweeping across the southern sky. The pole star, Polaris, at a moderate height for this latitude, not high overhead as it would appear from Scandinavia, but placed in the northern sky where the sailors of the Song Dynasty's remarkable merchant fleet have learned to find it, the fixed point around which the night sky slowly rotates. Song's astronomical clock tower, if you were to stand beside it right now, would be displaying the correct position of every major celestial object with the mechanical patience of its water-driven gears. The bronze armillary sphere on its upper platform oriented to match the sky above it. The rings within rings representing the celestial equator and the ecliptic and the meridian, all correct to the instruments of 1050. The clock has been running for decades, maintained by the astronomers who understand its mechanism. It is, in the deep night, an extraordinary thing, a machine that keeps perfect time while the city sleeps, that mirrors the sky while the sky moves. The fifth watch will come before long. When it does, the city will begin its next movement. Not a rush, not the dramatic transformation of a light switch being thrown, but a gradual accumulation of small sounds that precedes the day. A kitchen fire being stoked, the first canal boat moving from its mooring with a creak of rope and a soft splash of water, the monks at their dawn practice beginning their chanting, a market vendor setting up their stall in the pre-dawn dark, because the best position requires arriving before the competition. The night market, by some accounts, begins to reconstitute itself at the fifth watch, vendors who closed at the third watch returning before dawn to open again, creating that extraordinary continuity in which the city never fully stopped. But that is not yet, not quite. Right now the city is in its brief rest, the most advanced city on Earth, in the year we could call 1050, in the country we call China, in the dynasty we call Song. 1 million people breathing slowly. The canal water making its faint, steady sound. The ancestor tablets standing in their rows. The incense ash holding its ghost shape in the censer on the altar shelf. The warm beneath its sleeping household. The scholar's poem drying on the desk. The dark bowl with its residue of dried tea froth. The Gardenia Lanterns burning low. The fire watch soldier is 2 lanes over now, his light just barely audible as a movement in the larger dark, his voice a faint trace that arrives and passes. The cat on the screen wall has disappeared. At some point in the past hour, it moved off without announcement, as cats do, into whatever business the night offers animals who are never fully still. The chrysanthemums in the courtyard have their petals closed. The stone basin holds its rectangle of stars. All of this has been here for 1,000 years before our arrival, and something like it, the timber and the lanterns and the canal and the drum tower and the incense and the whisked tea and the printed books and the scholars and the merchants and the soldiers and the vendors, all of this persisted for another 77 years, until the armies of the Jin dynasty broke through the city's defenses in 1127, and the northern song ended. Who would one day write down everything he remembered about the night markets and the Gardenia Lanterns and the specific tastes of specific foods was a child in Kaifeng when the city fell. His book, The Dreams of Splendor of the Eastern Capital, is a document of grief made beautiful by precision, a man reconstructing, through the specific weight of remembered details, a city that no longer exists. He remembered the lanterns. He remembered the food. He remembered the sounds. Tonight, those things still exist. Tonight, Kaifeng is whole, and the night is long, and you are held inside this moment as gently as the city holds its million sleeping people, warmly, steadily, without drama, in the amber light of a sesame oil lamp burning down toward its base. Closing, the last watch, let the sounds fade now, not all at once. Let them fade the way sounds actually fade when you are lying in the dark, and the city is settling one layer at a time, beginning with the furthest, beginning with the sounds that were always just at the edge of hearing. The canal, which was the sound of connection, of all the world flowing into this city and out again, becomes something softer, not absent, present but lower, a sound beneath sounds. The lanterns are going out one by one. Not because anyone is extinguishing them, the candles are simply burning to their ends, the wax consumed, the flame lowering and narrowing until it no longer exists. Each small going out is private and unhurried. The city grows darker by increments, street by street, stall by stall, the orange of the Gardenia Lanterns becoming one less orange and one less, until the canal bank holds only the bridge lanterns and the fire station light and the moon, which is high now and cold and giving their silver edge. You are lying down. You have been lying down for a while now, and your body has been settling into the surface beneath you with the slow, reliable weight of genuine rest. Your breath has found its own rhythm, which is not a chosen rhythm, not a counted or controlled one, but the rhythm that breathing finds when the mind has stopped insisting on it. Your hands are somewhere you do not have to think about. The drum tower will sound once more before dawn, but not yet, not yet. There is a period in every night, in every city, in every life, when the active world has paused and the dreaming world has not quite begun, and you are suspended between them in something that is almost nothing, not thought, not sleep, not wakefulness, but the membrane between. This is that moment. You are in it. Kaifeng is in it, around you, this vast and impossible city breathing its slow breath through canal water and timber and tile and firelight and smoke. The ancestor tablets are patient. Thee is warm. The incense has left its smell in the room, faint and dry and good. Somewhere in the monastery across the canal perhaps, or in the distance where the sound barely carries a bell. Not the drum tower bell, not an announcement. A single struck note from a small bell, the kind that is used in Buddhist practice to mark moments of attention, to bring the practitioner back to the present. A single stroke, clear and round and complete, and then the silence that fills in around it. The silence in Kaifeng tonight is not empty. It is full of everything that has been quiet long enough to be heard. The breathing of 1,000,000 sleeping people, the movement of dark water in the canals, the faint creak of timber cooling in the night air, the patience of carved wood and fired clay and inked paper and pressed bronze. You are here. You have always been here in some sense, in this city that existed at the peak of human civilization in the year 1050, in the year 1000, in the years of the Northern Song that scholars still remember as one of the great moments of urban life on this planet. It lasted until it didn't, but tonight it lasts. Tonight the lanterns are still burning even the last ones. Tonight the scholar's poem is still wet on the paper. Tonight the soup is still warm in the vendor's lidded pot, waiting for the dawn and the next customer. Let the warmth of the move through you. Let the canal sound become simply the quality of silence rather than a sound separate from it. Let Kaifeng settle around you like a blanket, not tight, just present, just warm, just exactly this specific corner of the world and the year 1050 and the night that is almost done. You do not need to do anything now. The city will watch while you sleep. The fire soldiers will walk their lanes. The canal will carry its dark water. The drum tower will sound the 5th watch in its time, and then the city will begin to wake slowly, kindly, without alarming anyone who is not ready. But that is later. That is for the morning to handle. Right now there is only this: the breathing room, the warm surface, the quiet city, the stars above the last thread of incense smell in the still air of the main hall. Sleep now. The night market of Kaifeng is closed. The shadow puppet screen is dark. The bowl is empty. The scholar has set down his brush. And you are here, inside the most extraordinary night this particular city will ever make, resting in the amber quiet of a lamp burning down, in the year of the Northern Song, in the city of 1,000,000 people, in the last watch before the dawn.